All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the third edition of the FPS Reviewcast, where we're gonna talk about our latest reviews and the news over the course of the past week that everyone has been talking about. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, ring the bell, whatever the YouTubers do, or you can find us on Spotify, coming soon to Apple iTunes as well, if you prefer the audio-only flavor of this edition. Today we've got a bit of a different crew here, so actually this is probably our biggest showing to date as far as who is here. So I'm your host, David Schroth. I guess I'll be ringmastering this, and we have let's see who's first. I guess Leroy's first. Say hi, Leroy. He's on mute. Awesome. There he is.
Hey guys, hey, how's it going?
All right, even better. And I think we're going to drag that case review out of you soon enough, which will be good to go soon. We have Eduardo. Got Eduardo joining us for the first time, who finished his first review that he'll be talking about in a moment. Say hi if you could. All right,
hello, folks.
Hello, and we have now we have two Dan Ds. Original Dan has joined us for the last couple episodes. Go with the hi, I guess.
Hey.
Greetings. And then we have the new Dan D. I guess, what is this? Dan D version 2. He's joining us, ironically, in the motherboard review world, and he's got his first review underway. So if it's Dan D, then it's motherboards. I guess say hi, new Dan D.
Hello, everybody.
So I guess, anyhow, let's get straight to it and move on through all the different fun things we've been working on this week. We're going to kick today off with Eduardo's review of the XFX Radeon RX 5500 XT THICC II Pro 4 gigabyte video card. Now that's probably a little bit bigger than the last motherboard review that came across here as far as title, but shorter than other video cards at least. So I guess with that, I guess, Eduardo, we can put you on the spot and tell us a little bit about the card.
You know, it's the first time I've used an AMD card in quite a while. I've been on the video train like a lot of other people, but to get back on the card subject, it was honestly a pleasant experience. I mean, other than the name, which is gobbledygook all over the place and a little bit too long, it overclocked well, it stayed cool, and it was competitive against the 1650 Super, which I honestly had expectations of seeing the 1650 Super kind of go away with it. I don't really pay attention to these reviews, or at least I used to not before writing them. I'm more of a high-end guy myself. So when I put these in the bed, there was kind of blind assumption, no prior review in my head. And yeah, I was kind of taken away with how it did. It had a nice high overclock, and it beat the Asus editions that Brent reviewed.
Right, that makes sense. So I guess as far as the card goes, you mentioned it's, would you say it is a good, I guess what resolution were you gaming at? Was this a 1080p or a 1440 card? What performance level can we expect out of this guy?
Oh yeah, definitely. I forgot to get to that, but 1080p all the way. I tried some 2560 or 1440p gaming, and there's some titles you can get away with that on. Definitely older titles. But for the most part, if you're buying this now, you're going to be looking at 1080p for your sweet spot. You're not going to be going above that.
All right, fantastic. And I know we've reviewed a whole bunch of XFX cards, over the time that we've been here, and they've all historically done pretty well, I think. As far as the overall testing and so on. Trying to think what other fun stuff is in here. I guess overclocking you mentioned was pretty good. So was it the usual 10% across the board, or let me take a look here?
Percentage-wise, I actually don't know off the top of my head, but it was fairly competitive with other AIB cards from what I saw, with what Brent tested. It was 1936 average on the OC, so it looks like a almost 5% boost on the clock speed.
Right, that's pretty good, and typically in that price range, the limit often turns into the power limit of the overall card. Whereas, if you're limited to a 5 or 10% boost over the standard power limit, and that's kind of all they give you. So it's like if I had another 20% power, this thing could really launch to the moon even.
If they unlocked this card, it would be a fun card to play with. I will say that, because the RAM, for example, is locked. You can't go past. I forgot what the exact megahertz amount was, but you can't go past it. And obviously, it's limited on power. I think it was 1150 millivolts or something like that. Spitballing here out of the top of my head numbers, but if they let you tweak it, it would be a fun little cheap card to toy with. I'm not gonna lie.
So at 1080p, did you find the 4 gigs of VRAM to be a limitation on performance?
No, I didn't see any game that seemed to cause an issue with it. And as you see in the review, even with 8 GB models against like a 1650 Super, they tend to end up the same. There's no real benefit in that 8 GB model, in my personal opinion. If you're at this price point, save the money. And the only thing you should be doing in terms of spending more money is going to like a 5600 or a 1660 Ti, whatever the flavor is that you want.
Right, spend an extra $100 instead of an extra $30 or $40, and you're off to the races. Okay, perfect. And I guess final bottom line on this: if you're on the market for something in this price point, is this a card you're going to buy?
I would recommend it. I would solidly recommend it. Like I said, other than the size of it, which I said in the review, I said that the shroud is a little large for no real good reason. That's its only big knock. For that price point, it overclocks well, it performs well in the game it's supposed to play, at the resolutions it should be playing at, I should say. And I had no glitches or driver issues that cause it to be like a frustration or a showstopper.
Right. Okay. Awesome. So put that in the books. Thanks for your effort on your first one, and I think you've got your next one underway. We can touch on that as we wrap up, as far as what you got on the bench coming up next.
I've got an EVGA 1650 Super I'm working on right now. A lot smaller, which I like to see a card in this price range and power profile, all that. So yeah, hopefully I can get that out soon.
All right. Awesome. Sounds great. I guess for our next review, this wasn't really a review. This was kind of this is a refresh article that I just threw together because I need to properly frame that upcoming review that was going to be following the day after of the SilverStone AR01. So as our readers know, for doing AIO testing, when I first started, I haven't told the story on the Reviewcast, right? So I can tell stories. So, we had this Intermax 360 millimeter AIO cooler, the THICC II, that we got in and we're going to review it. But this big badge on the box said that it can take care of heat loads of 500 plus watts of power. So I was like, okay, hold my beer. So it's like we just couldn't leave it alone. So I played around with different things, looking at getting how can I get 500 watts of power into this? And then Intel sends us the 10980 Extreme Edition for us to review late last year. Dan reviews it, and I'm reading his review, and holy cow, that thing overclocked, puts out takes up 500 watts of power. So I put 2 and 2 together, got 4, and I was like, this is going to be our new platform for AIOs. So we got an X299 board, load the thing up, get a nice, cool, case setup that's kind of like a flat wall thing. You've seen the pictures. I'll link to it in the description below to tell you guys, so if you want to take a look at that rig. And it did a great job, especially for the 360 millimeter coolers, in putting out a whole ton of heat, because that stock clock, that thing will still do about 200 watts of power going into the CPU at a slight overclock. So 3.7 gigahertz is the main base, the base stock clock. Bump it up to 4.3 gigahertz, that jumps up into the 350 range, and then you bump it up to 4.7 gigahertz for the all-core, and we're talking 500 plus watts of power going into the CPU thing. And we've melted a few AIOs and really stressed them out for that. Long story short, I decided, okay, I'm going to see what we're going to do some air coolers. I got a Hyper 212. Let's see what happens. I throw that on a stock clocks, fire up Cinebench, and within a minute, the thing is overheating, and it's just poof, it's gone, because I guess as I say in Spaceballs, the gas inside the heat pipes of the Hyper 212 went flat, which tends to happen when you take the I guess when there's too much heat, the gas just vaporizes and cannot return to liquid, so it's not circulating and actually cooling, back there. So like, well, this is not going to work for air cooling. So there's a long story. It was fun. But so we're like, okay, we got to build something that's a little bit more in this world. So we got a 2700X, which is a 105 watt TDP, put it onto a X470 based platform, threw an old video card in there, nice power supply, and that's kind of becoming our base standard for air coolers, because air coolers can actually handle this level of heat. Now, the other thing in the article, just kind of thinking through testing methodology, is that it's very difficult to measure things because there's so much dynamic stuff built into motherboards, into AIOs, as far as, how fast are the fans and the pump running. It's like your performance that you get is completely dependent upon the fan curve that you have programmed into the motherboard. So our testing takes those variables out and runs the fans and the pumps and the AIOs, is kind of speaking to both of them, really at static temperatures, static voltages, and at static clocks without any sort of boost that's actually enabled. And so when we do that, we can apply a consistent heat load at different levels, running a real world benchmark or a real world processing load to actually figure out how these things actually perform, and we're able to compare differing fan levels. Because those are the types of data points that I think a reader would need to be able to set a fan curve. So if you know that, okay, well, if I have this chip or this AIO, this CPU cooler, I can run the fans at 1,000 RPMs and get good performance. If I drop it to 600 RPMs, I get the same noise level and temps go up 20 degrees. So that's good things to know. Or I know how high I can run it and so on. It provides good data points for that. So anyhow, I guess in a nutshell, that's kind of our new testbed platform. We have a slightly different, less challenging one that air coolers can actually run through. And I've gone for a while. I mean, guys, how do you like the sound of that? I guess it depends on how loud the decibel meter is.
No, I think that's excellent methodology on air cooling test.
All right. Yeah, it's tough because I look around and I don't know. I don't want to knock the competition, but it's hard to say, well, how can I reproduce results? And we should be able to reproduce our results, from the air cooling. So just, as a quick recap, on the air cooling side, we're going to, we look at the, idle is a whopping 58 watts of total draw. We turned off PBO, which is giving us variable clocks, and it would also downclock the CPU when it reaches a certain temperature. So that's where if you don't watch out for it on the AMD CPU testing especially, is that you'll cap, once you hit about 67 degrees, the processor will start throttling down, even though it's not overheating. That's kind of its limit, where it starts pulling back and putting less heat into it.
Yeah, that's that target temperature that people think that because it's written on their website as max temperature. And so people have this misconception that the Ryzens can only handle being like 68 degrees, and then they'll melt down at 69 or something, or they'll start throttling. And it's not the case. It's just the target temperature for all their boost algorithms. So yeah, if you take the boost algorithm out by, more or less turning off PBO and all of that, your results will be the same. Because, if you have a really weak air cooler on there, then it's just going to downclock that CPU, and it's going to make things easier. So if you do it that way, you're going to get CPU coolers, I think, showing themselves in a better light than they really should be.
Right, because when I had PBO on, I was like, well, okay, at full fan speed, I was getting, say, 64 degrees, and it was running just fine. Then I cut it back to 1,000 RPMs. It would go up only to 67 degrees, but my clocks would be down by 200 megahertz here or there. So PBO definitely kind of threw that off, but that's kind of the default experience for everything. And really,
well, it's PB2 algorithm, and then PBO is slightly more aggressive, but yeah.
Right. I mean, maybe PB2 may have been different.
That's the default behavior for those chips. Well, yeah. It's the default for the 2700 and the 3000 series. The PB2, the Precision Boost, is the standard, and the Precision Boost Overdrive, you have to purposely enable that in the motherboard. Usually pops up a warning with a legal thing that you have to agree to. But the PBO is on the 2000 series Ryzen's is actually quite a bit more aggressive, and you do get something out of it. PBO on a Ryzen 3000 series is a little bit different animal, and some chips it's okay and some it's not, but that's a different kind of thing. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's a good method. Get those CPUs to static reproducible clocks, and then you might even want to consider quote unquote overclocking and putting them kind of towards their maximum boost clock, like you were overclocking, and see how
I did do that. So I've got the first one is kind of the base, like 3.7, and then I took it up to 4.1 all core.
Oh, you're right on then. Perfect.
All right, so that's like an extra 70 watts or so, and that's really when they really started to wobble. They didn't crash until they hit the low 80s as far as temperature goes. So at least I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, I think so.
So that is the whole setup. You can see here is like, oh, I am so short on video cards around here. I had a GTX 460 in there for testing, but it did the job, right? So that's kind of like the baseline for our methodology. And then, I guess we'll segue that into the SilverStone AR01 V3 CPU air cooler review that I knocked out as our first one on this platform. Now, I compared it with the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo because, raise your hand if that's been your default cooler that you go and buy for friends and family.
Got like 30 of them.
Right.
No, I make everybody water cool. I don't have them mess around.
Okay, so 2-1 there. I guess, New Dan, you want to break the tie?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've got several of the Hyper 212s that I've sent out, and I still use a couple of them.
Okay, so funny, I have never used a 212. I have never installed one. The closest I've ever gotten to seeing one was on the shelf at Micro Center.
I'm just going to send you one for giggles.
And I have built so many machines for people, but like I make them get AIOs. I really do. Like most people that come to me, they've got enough disposable income. They're like, hey, literally nobody comes to me with a budget, say, hey, build a computer because it's going to get out of control anyway. And so they come to me and they're like, hey, so I make them get a decent AIO at kind of a minimum. So I have never, ever touched a 212 ever.
Well, it's like the rest of us, just when they go on sale for $20 each, we stock up. So
that's exactly what I did. I got like
when I've got them.
Of them.
So we have fun. So that I think is a good air cooler comparison because everybody has one. So what's interesting though is the Hyper 212 it's got 4. Yeah, the name is good. The branding, I guess, is on point. There's variations. The name is growing. It's like there's an Evo and there's a Plus and there's a and so on. But it is actually a 4 cooler solution. I haven't pulled it off the bench over there, but it actually has 4 heat pipes that run through it. And as you can see, I've got the AR01 right here on hand, and it has 3 heat pipes that run through that. So some people would think that more. I guess more is better, right? You got 4 heat pipes versus 3. When you actually look at them side by side, and if I pulled this off, you could see the heat pipes on the AR01 are actually a lot bigger and thicker than the 212 has. So that could be where it's getting some of its difference in that it's got more liquid, a little bit more volume. There's a little bit different approach. Other than that, it's kind of hard to tell the difference with them side by side. Right. So anyhow, I guess enough on the heat pipes and 3 versus 4 and things like that. When I strapped this thing to the test bench, compared it to the 212, it actually performed very comparably to the Hyper 212. Overall, it was plus or minus a degree or 2 Celsius. At stock clocks at various fan speeds, we were right in there. It kind of traded blows. It was either 1/2 degree better, 1/2 degree worse. At stock clocks, overclocking didn't go quite as well. Both coolers worked fine at the overclock speed at max fan, but beyond that, it was kind of game over. So really, it's you're not going to be overclocking much with these guys because it's a little bit too hot. But the one thing that was really the redemption factor of the AR01 was its overall sound level. So when I fired it up compared to the other one, I noticed an actual difference between. I could hear the difference without the decibel meter telling me that one was louder than the other. So the ARO one, across the board at each of the fan levels that we looked at, was significantly quieter than the Hyper 212. So the fact that it is tied in performance is good, but the fact that it slapped the 2112 around with a trout as far as noise goes really helps differentiate it.
Yeah, I was a little surprised at the sound level, that it was significantly lower than the Hyper 212s.
Right, and I think the other thing with SilverStone, like even looking back at the AIOs that we've done from them, is that they typically have this similar characteristics where they may not be the best performers. They might tie or do a little bit worse than some of the others, but from an overall fan perspective, the SilverStones that we've reviewed, have ended up being quieter than the Enermaxes and the Corsairs and so on at comparable fan speeds. So that seems to be an overall theme with the SilverStone stuff that we have reviewed over the course of the past 6 months or so.
Yeah, which a lot of people look for a quieter system.
Absolutely. And, and kind of for final points, and I was rounding this up in the forums earlier today, someone was saying, well, it really should be priced a little bit less because we can get a Hyper 2112 is $35 and this one's 43.
I was guilty of that one.
Oh, you did that. That's right. So you're keyboard warrioring on the price, but then I kind of point out that it's like, well, that extra $8 is buying you significantly less noise for the same level of performance of the Hyper 212. So if you value a quieter system and the same level of performance in this budget cooler range, then that's absolutely why I dished out the silver award for it, is because of that intersection of the value against performance against the 212 being quieter, even though it's a little bit more expensive. That's something that if I'm buying the 212 and I can get this for $8 more, I'm going to pull the trigger on it.
Right. And I can't remember who it was made a point that actually the Hyper 212s have went up in price.
Right, of course. I mean, the 212s, they will go on the Black Friday sale for $20 each. Absolutely. And I'm sure, I know I've bought some at $20. I know Leroy has, because he probably told me they were $20. So it's like, we just all go buy 4 each and strap them on. But, in today's retail prices, the 212 is $35. I think just released literally like a week or two ago there was a, what do they call it, a V2, where there's some new version of it that's actually retailing at $40 right now. So I may have to order one of those and see how that performs to the original and to this guy.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we're within a couple bucks. It earned a silver award. I was pretty happy with it overall.
I agree with the silver award for an air cooler on that one.
Right, fantastic, because that's it's always subjective for the awards. It's opinion based on what we see. So I guess
they are.
Speaking of subjective things that we can't even overclock, actually I don't know, Dan might have overclocked it somehow. We have the first of its kind here on the FPS Review exclusive, a Secretlab Titan Dark Knight Edition gaming chair review, and I've been jokingly referring this as a throne review. So I guess Dan, tell us about your new throne.
Yeah. I'm hard on chairs, so I've destroyed a Herman Miller Aeron and a Ergo Human. Was it the ME7 ERG? I think is the popular one. In fairness, I had those for like a really long time. The Herman Miller was even I guess it was a used one I bought, and it was manufactured in the 90s. So the fact that it lasted that long was kind of surprising. But anyway, I needed a new chair, so I went shopping for them, and then, Secretlab has a pretty good advertising going on right now. So you see the name pop up everywhere, but they're not really in the stores. So, you can't go and sit in one. So I said, you know what? And I'm kind of picky when it comes to chairs. I have a bad back, from injuries sustained, long ago and all that. So, and when you sit in front of computers as long as I do, having a good chair is huge. And so I went ahead and I ordered the Secretlab. I took a chance on it, and it was mostly just kind of comments. One of the things that people had said is it's so similar to the Noble chair that they're pretty sure they come out of the same factory. And I have sat in the Noble chair, so I said, you know what, I'll go ahead and take a chance on it. And I bought it. And so when you order these things, they send them out in batches. So like you can tell when you click on their website at the different versions, like what wave number it's coming in. They don't really give you ship dates. So mine was, I can't remember what wave number it was in, but that particular, like they wait for that whole wave's worth of reserves to fill up and then they ship them out. Anyway, long story short, I after my initial confirmation email, I heard nothing from him. But I was expecting the chair wouldn't ship out for another 6 weeks. I think I got it in 3, 4, something like that. So the thing showed up early at my door, and I hadn't been expecting that. But, that's obviously a really nice surprise. When you open the box, it smells like a brand new car, with leather seats and everything. I mean, it really does. And, start handling the materials. And it not only did the chair go together really nicely, but you could feel the quality of the materials. And they started around $400. And I think somebody pointed out on our forum that they've gone up a little bit. So like, I think I quoted the base price at like $399. I think they've gone up to like $420 for this particular model, or for the Titan, the base Titan, I should say. This one, the Dark Knight edition, you pay a little bit more when you pick one of the ones with a game logo on it. And then there's a difference in price for cloth versus PU leather. I don't remember what the difference is in the price, but there is a real leather option. I didn't get that because now the chair is like $700-800 if you do that. So they go up a lot. I had heard kind of mixed things about the PU leather, like the 2019 versions, they kind of like came apart or something or had issues, but the 2020s are supposed to be, kind of fixed. I hadn't had any issues with this one. I wanted to have the chair for about 30 days before I made an opinion on it because, there's a break-in period and all that stuff. So it goes together easy, sat in it. And when I first sat in it, I was like, holy crap, this thing is super hard. Not the back so much, but the actual like seat bottom is incredibly hard. I said, you know what, I'm just going to stick it out and deal with it. And I came to realize really quick that firmness, while it's not, plush, it's not comfortable in that way. You can sit in this thing literally all day. And I have since I got it. I've had some of those 18, 20-hour days in front of the computer. And, you can wake up or you can stand up out of the chair, after sitting for 6 hours or whatever. And then, I'll feel fine, despite my back issues. So I was really super impressed with it. It's got a crazy amount of adjustability. You can lay the back almost entirely flat. There's a recline lever, like you'd have for adjusting a seat back in a performance car or something like that. But you can actually lay the whole thing, back even further if you wanted to. So it's a real nice chair. And, compared to like, your Herman Millers and your the Ergo Humans and some of the other options, I think it's priced very well. It seems like it's just as well built as any like the leather Ergo Humans or anything like that, if not more so. If the chair feels actually more solid than the Rainer Ergo Humans do. But you have crazy adjustability in them. Arms go forward, back, they rotate out, all that stuff. You can actually, it does require a screw or adjusting the bolts, but you can pull the arm, the mounts the arm rests it on. You can pull those way out, whatever you want. So it's a really nice chair. I'm still sitting in it. I'm sitting in it right now, as a matter of fact. And I've had a lot of hours on this chair since writing that. And, I don't question the purchase for a minute. I mean, it was really, really excellent. And I've tried a lot of chairs over the years, and some of them I didn't have very long because they were just awful. And I sat in tons of them at, Micro Center and Fry's locally here, and I didn't like hardly any of them. So this one was kind of, you'd figure it'd be good based on the fact that, there's so much advertising for it, and, a lot of people rave about them, but, I was super picky and really, especially after sitting in it initially and feeling that hard seat cushion, I wasn't sure that I'd like it, but I do. It's broken in a bit, so it's a little softer than it used to be. But
Very encouraging.
Yeah, and there's been no wear on the, one of the things that happens sometimes is you get in these chairs and you start sitting in them and, there's wear on the piston, there's, wear on the casters and things like that. And this thing feels exactly like it did when I first assembled it. I haven't had any screws back out or have to tighten anything up or anything like that. It's really been quite amazing.
All right. That's a pretty good tale for that. And I see you handed out a gold award for it, which you don't do those often. So this must have been pretty good experience for you. And it's probably going to be tough. Like if we want you to do another chair review, you're probably going to have a hard time, giving this one up, even if it is for a month.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll certainly do it, but the only thing that concerns me about them, and this is kind of a really double-edged sword if any manufacturer were to ever approach us about a chair review or we contact any of them, is my back is screwed up sometimes. I'll know really quick whether or not that will be an excruciating 30 days or not.
Right, and actually, speaking of which, and I don't know if this is a story I want to tell, or I don't know. I can tell the story, but there is another chair manufacturer that actually contacted us and wanted to send us a chair for us to review, and so we've done a little bit of back and forth, and I think they are not looking for a very impartial review or opinion, so I don't think it's going to work out. I think I should probably just leave it at that.
Oh yeah, okay, I'm curious about that, and we'll take that discussion offline. I'm curious as to which one, because with our former employer, there were, he was in good with the chair manufacturers, and actually I had sat in a lot of them, because he's local to me, so I'd go over his house and stuff, and so I've sat in all the Corsair ones, I've sat in the Noble chair. In fact, I was over at his house playing games, and that's how I knew the Noble chair was actually pretty good. So I was actually going to buy the Noble chair, and then I'm reading, a lot of people are like, I think the chair, the Secretlabs are the same chair, and I don't know that they are 100%, but the design, especially when you look at the underside of them, they look so close. I mean, they are super close. So if they're not made in the same factory, I would be really shocked. They do use different, doing some research on it, they do use some different seating materials. So there is that. But so kind of my experience with that chair is kind of what led me to say, okay, I'll give this one a shot. Interestingly enough, too, on the ordering, I ordered my chair after a guy I know ordered a chair for him, a friend of mine, and I got mine first. So my order actually shipped first. And on their website right now, if somebody listening wants to buy one of these, the only thing I would caution you is that they do have a bit of a wait right now. They say that on their website. There's all kinds of delays about it. Everything that's going on in the world right now, but it is worth the wait. They are really good chairs. I mean, like I said, I've had all the main ones, and this is easily as good as those, and for a lot less. I mean, we were making cracks about the Logitech Herman Miller Aeron chair. It's like $1,600. So,
well, and the fact that you've used it for over 30 days too is encouraging. It isn't like you put it together, sat in it, and went, okay, let's write a review about it.
Yeah. Well, I had this in mind when I started out. I'm like, okay, I'm buying this chair. I bought it with my own money. So there's that. This was not something that was sent to us. And I thought, you know what? I might as well go ahead and review this thing. So whether or not I kept it or sold it, and of course, it turned out good enough that I kept it. So there you are.
Well, I'm glad you did do a review on it. Like I said, it's encouraging to see these quality in this price range, Yeah,
it's still not cheap. I mean, there's a lot of cheaper ones like the AK Racing and the DX Racing. I think you can get them on Amazon for like about half this. I don't have enough experience with those chairs to really talk about it, but so it's definitely not cheap for what it is, but it's a quote unquote gaming chair. It is a little bit higher priced, but it's not. There are still way more expensive options than that. So I think, given how long this should last, it's pretty good for the money. And there's kind of, even though it's a little more expensive, there's some value in that, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think I'd be curious to see how long the gas lift works, so you can report back on when that thing gives out, because that's usually the first thing that goes on the chairs that I have.
Yeah, and I'm kind of heavy,
yeah, I probably got 20 pounds on you. So,
well, that was another thing. I bought it because they make an Omega model that is, I think, only good for like 230 pounds. And I was like right on the line of that. So I ordered the Titan because it's kind of like the same chair, but a little bit bigger. There's some other mechanical differences when you look at them. I think the gas lift is stronger on this one, but this one's rated to go up to, I think, 300. And then there's
was a 290, I think.
Or no, yeah, it's 290. It's like just under 300. And then there's an XL model, which is rated for like over 350 or something like that. I don't remember its exact weight rating. So don't get mad at me if I get that wrong, but it's definitely rated for much higher. And a friend of mine thought my chair was so cool when he came over, and he is a very big dude. He ordered the XL model though, as a result of seeing mine. So, for the money, I think, it's a great chair. So
I might recommend that to a friend, because I got a friend who can't game more than like 3 hours before his back is just giving him issues.
Yeah, the chair usually has a lot to do with that. And on the gas thing, since I'm using this chair every day, if there is a problem with it, I'll do an update on it. And I probably will do an update on it anyway. Like let's say, a year after purchase date or something like that, I may follow up and show people how it's holding up and if I've had any problems with it in that time.
That would be an excellent idea.
All right. I think it's time to hit some news before we run out of time tonight. So we got a few news articles that are lined up that kind of carry us across what's been most popular and what we want to throw eggs at. So let's start peeling through that. I think this first one is we have heard a rumor that says that one of the cards that are allegedly shipping as a rumor have been canceled. So we have a rumor saying that a rumor actually was a rumor, but is no longer a rumor, and that the RTX 3080 and 3070, which are allegedly going to be shipping with double the RAM of the original iterations, is no longer going to come to pass. So does anybody have a take on this as far as could this be that either one, this is an unreliable source, or two, could it be maybe they're not scared of the RX 6000 series anymore? Could it be a shortage of GDDR6X? Or could, I don't know, what else?
Well, I mean, you bring up a lot of good maybes, possibilities. I always thought that, and there seemed to be some credence to the fact that these cards at least were intended to release. I don't know. Well, at least the 3080 20 gig model, and a 3080 20 gig model, in my opinion, actually makes a lot of sense. It's not, because one of the complaints about the existing 3080 is the lack of VRAM. That 10 gig is fine today, but if you're somebody who wants to keep a video card for 3 years, is it going to be okay then? I mean, because we've seen it before where cards that were still plenty fast had they were plenty fast initially, but down the line their lack of VRAM became problematic. And I can't remember whichever one, there was the one with the lawsuit that had like 3 gig.
970.
Oh yeah, the 970. That extra half gig or something. But even today though, it's like, the difference between the 2060 and the 2060 Super is huge. And that the latter can run most games at 1440, no problem. But the former, the standard 2060, is really just a 1080p card.
Yeah, so I think a 3080 made some sense. And NVIDIA's done this before where they drop, like a Titan level card, which, they've pretty much already said that that's what the 3090 really is. And then, they'll have, like in the case of they did this with the the 1080 series, because if you remember, the 1080 dropped, and then the Titan XP dropped, and then later they came out with a 1080 Ti, and the 1080 Ti was, pretty much the same performance as the Titan level card, albeit with less memory and a little more optimized for gaming and less for consumer type stuff. Not the degree that we saw with like earlier Titans that had like, double FPU performance and all that stuff. So I think a 3080 made some sense, and that the rumored price of around $1,000 made sense. And if we're not seeing that, yeah, it could be that there's delays on GDD. There's not enough GDDR6 to go around. Maybe they can't hit that price point where they think it makes sense, or possibly that they don't fear the RX 6000. That's a possibility. But if I had to hedge anything, I'd say it's probably not the most reliable source, because this does all come from, I think, the same source, and their track record. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I don't know.
Right.
If it is delayed, I think it could be any number, or perhaps even a combination of reasons.
Yep. So I guess that should be interesting to see what actually pans out on it. Because I guess we're still waiting on that flood of the 8 and 10 gig models to wash over the market. So we'll see when that happens. But speaking of the RX 6000, I mean, we have a weekly rumor about that. We have the RX 6000, the official launch in AMD is actually coming up in I think it's October 28th, if I'm not mistaken. They're going to have a webcast. We'll cover it in our news section, of course, and kind of brag about all the things. But the latest is that they may be hitting a 2.4 gigahertz game clock, and potentially boosting a little bit higher than that. Have 16 gigs of RAM, use about 250 watts of power. This is looking like some pretty impressive numbers, and I think one of the other articles I saw today, we've had so many articles about rumors and stuff that this might actually be beating a 3080, but then again, every rumor that we see is either plus minus, or was it win, lose, or draw against a 3080.
Yeah, you have people that, and I think a lot of people just they really want to believe badly that this is like some 3080 killer or whatever, and we see it every generation. There's rumors where it's way better, way worse, somewhere in the middle, and the truth is usually somewhere in the middle, right? I mean, it's usually neither of the extreme, edge case rumors that you see. On this one, I don't know. I really don't know. They could have done a lot with RDNA 2, as I understand it. It's pretty much from the ground up. Maybe. I don't know.
I think a lot of it's going to depend on supply and demand.
Well, I think the demand is there, because you have people that are lining up outside of Micro Center for a shot at a 3080 or 3090. There were people, I was actually up at Micro Center for a completely different reason, the day before the 3080s launched, and people were like already like, well, what do I got to do to get one? And they were just going nuts about it. And Micro Center was pretty frank. They're like, listen, we got 11 cards. You got the same shot as everybody else. Get here early if you want one. That's pretty much it. So I think the demand is there, and you see it in the forums, and people all over. They really want to buy these things. So I think AMD knows the demand is certainly there, but whether or not they can meet the supply,
that's the big question.
Yeah, and I don't know. And the thing is, if that thing is using GDDR6 RAM instead of the HBM2 RAM, then they might be using some of the same supply. Like if NVIDIA was running into GDDR6 supply issues, then AMD might be as well. So if it's kind of like we see a lot of AMDs, then we certainly know that if a 3080 doesn't show up with 20 gigs of RAM, it wasn't GDDR6 limitations, right? So I don't know. I do think that 255 watt TDP is probably a bit optimistic, but
Well, Dan, to interject, just to make sure, it's like I believe the the RTX 30 series, like the 3080 and 90, are using GDDR6X, which is a different flavor
you're right.
than the standard GDDR6 that AMD is using.
You are right, because it has ECC support and all that. You're right, it is different. My bad on that.
Right, so it's one where that memory supply could be the arrow to the knee of the 30 series.
True.
You also have the difference of the process, the node they're on. AMD's going to use TSMC, 7 nanometer. NVIDIA's using, what is it, 8 or 9, whatever the heck Samsung's process is.
Yeah, Samsung's 8 nanometer process on the 30 series, I guess they call it. So yeah. But beyond that, the 2.4 gigahertz clock, I would say plausible. 255 watt, maybe. That's probably like the most doubtful part of it for me is, if you're going to hit like clocks that high and you're going to have 16 gigs of RAM on the card, PCI Express 4.0, all those features, a 255 watt TDP, I don't know. I mean, TSMC's 7 nanometer process is pretty efficient. So maybe.
Right. So it'll be interesting, and I think by the time we have our next review cast, I think we'll have seen the launch of the 3070. We'll have seen the press announcement of the RX 6000 series, and at least we can actually see the specs. So we can kind of speculate on, at least what, I'm sure AMD is going to share a bunch of slides that are cherry-picked examples, just like every launch review, and we'll be able to tell a little bit more about what we might be able to expect. But it should be an interesting week to see what reality comes to, especially if we can get those cards in hand as soon as we can. So, kind of speaking of which, I think I'm looking for the right quote to use to kind of introduce our next topic, such as receiving transmission, awaiting instructions, I have returned. So, basically, it sounds like Blizzard's preparing Starcraft III, and I guess they're calling it quits on Starcraft II. They're saying that I guess they're jacked up and good to go, and that they're going to let us live for the swarm and start working towards Starcraft III. And so I know, Dan, you had First, Dan, you had you had some thoughts on what we might see with StarCraft III compared to how the differences between 1 and 2, and then going to 2 to 3. What do you think we're going to see with this?
I don't know, to be honest, because the problem is that well, first off, going from StarCraft 1, I was a huge fan of. I played the crap out of it. I have many hours in it. StarCraft 2, I didn't, because I didn't like some of the design decisions they had with it. I didn't like them splitting up the single player campaign into 3 chunks. I didn't like them locking your monitor support down, because they didn't support widescreen or anything like that, and they didn't do scaling if you went to a 4K monitor and stuff like that. I hated decisions like that. So I opted not to buy the game. I have played it, friends' machines and stuff like that, and they had it up at the Micro Center, and I played it up there for a little bit one day. But as far as 3 goes, I don't know, because and we were talking about this beforehand. The Blizzard of today is not the Blizzard that put out the first couple of games. They are controlled by Activision now, so I'm sure that they are working on StarCraft III and transitioning to that. Because I think StarCraft 2's potential for revenue is gone, so it's time to push out a 3rd one. But as to what we'll see, who knows? I'm sure it'll be beautiful, it'll look good and all that, but I don't know. I don't have any idea what to expect out of the game itself.
The big thing for me is if they need to bring back StarCraft 1. One of the things I loved was that the map making, the customization, and the games you could play. It was limitless. And then StarCraft 2 was just so locked down. The maps people made seemed to always be the same thing. It really killed it for me, because I play the single player and then I switched to online multiplayer. StarCraft 1 gave me so much of a new flavor every week to keep playing and playing and playing. StarCraft 2 didn't give me any of that.
StarCraft 2, when it came out, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I vaguely remember it being sometime around the time that was it the fourth Command and Conquer came out. I think it came out after that, but kind of it was super disappointing as well, and it just kind of seemed like the RTS as it came out around StarCraft II just kind of, they took away a lot of the things that made them so good in the first place. Like Command and Conquer 4 was utterly stupid. It had, you have a game about base building and all this stuff and they took the base building out of it.
Wait, so Eduardo, are you saying that you didn't just go play Big Game Hunters over and over and over again?
Yeah, David, that's what I'm saying.
Riveting, because that's all I ever got to.
I actually enjoyed making maps on StarCraft 1. I made a few of them when I was younger. My cousins and we'd play hours and hours on that game. And StarCraft 2, it just didn't have that for me. And
There's
especially
something
when they split it up into 3 games with the campaign mode. That really made me mad. I didn't even buy the other 2. I just bought the first one and I was done with it.
And that's kind of my point, is there was something about StarCraft 1 as a game that StarCraft 2 just didn't have. It was like missing something. And it just wasn't nearly as good. So I don't know. I'm hoping that they can undo kind of the mistakes made with 2 and do a better StarCraft 3, but whether or not they do is anyone's guess.
Right.
We'll have to see.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting, and we'll follow as the various news announcements come out. It's probably going to be a few years before we see any credible progress, because that's how long it'll take them to develop the new game concept and so on. But we'll keep an eye on this one to see whatever other rumors pop up. Yeah. So next up, I guess still in the games world, everybody loves loot boxes. So they figured that, I guess some folks figured they get some class action lawsuit lawyers together, create a lawsuit, and so maybe we can get like $1.25 off our next EA Games purchase, with folks complaining about the loot box mechanics that are in many of EA's titles that they haven't recommended. So the core of the issue is a loot box considered gambling, and I guess these are the Canadians that are getting bent out of shape over this. But I guess unload on loot boxes, guys.
Well, I've got an absurd amount of time in Mass Effect 3. Not only did I play the game a lot, but I played its multiplayer. I bought some of the merchandise, which had game codes, which actually gave you loot boxes, and then I also, even made mods for the game, texture mods and stuff like that. So I played the crap out of it. And the loot boxes, you get them for doing things and you open them and it's RNG as to what you get. So, and the game did allow you to pay for them with like you could buy the BioWare points, I think it was, and then spend the BioWare points on the gear itself. And although you can do it in game without spending any actual money, the encouragement is that, you obviously can get all this stuff a lot faster if you just buy it. I think it is gambling, because you pay money just for a shot at something. So, I don't disagree with that. Now, I don't necessarily think that is, the most awful thing in the world, and that, it should be, banned outright necessarily. But obviously, these practices can be predatory for children who grab their parents' wallets and, go ham on the, BioWare points or whatever the game has.
Yeah, don't get me started on like buying levels in Fortnite when you already have the battle pass and plenty of time to complete the season.
Yeah, see, exactly.
That's I mean, it's like my kids want V-Bucks and they want to go and buy all the levels so they don't have to earn them. And I'm like,
yeah, I don't think people who are familiar with the games would argue that it's really not gambling, because I think it most certainly is. I've never had a problem with, the transactions like, the way Destiny 2 does it. It's all cosmetic crap. And they give you other ways in the game to get the cosmetic crap, albeit, it's delayed. You have to use another currency in the game to get it, and they have like a window of time where you can like buy it, and then it's not going to be for weeks or even a couple months or whatever, and then you can buy it with the other currency. I don't have a huge problem with that. I mean, obviously, I'm not a big fan of it. I think all the shit should just be in the game, but at the same time, as it comes to loot boxes, I'm not surprised, and I'm pretty sure this isn't the first time EA's been sued over this.
Right. Yeah, it looks like this one's the Canadians bringing it, but I assume there's probably some lawsuits going on in the States, and unfortunately, it's with these things, the lawyers usually just win. Then,
the class action suit. What are you going to get? $2 or $3? And even worse, they're probably going to give them to you in like EA points or something.
Right. Get a discount off of that and go on. But anyhow, it's. I mean, at least the uproar from this seems at least to have reduced the number of like loot boxes in there, especially like with that Star Wars Battlefront thing where they had to pull them. So there's been a lot of backlash about loot boxes. So I think a lot of folks are moving towards the premium cosmetic sort of thing, which is printing them just as much money.
Yeah, Battlefront 2, they did a 180 on that, and they pulled all that stuff out entirely. I mean, you could still get the stuff, but you had to do it the slower way. And of course, when you played that game, as I did, you find out real quick that the game was actually structured around the loot boxes. So they had to like rebalance everything, because earning the stuff in game would take you this absurd amount of time that literally no one had. And then you look at games like Star Wars Squadrons and Jedi Fallen Order, they released with 0 microtransactions of any kind. I mean, EA has been kind of afraid of it, at least with the Star Wars brand. And so anything that's come out, with Star Wars on it, there's been absolutely no microtransactions in it whatsoever, not even cosmetics.
Right. Absolutely. And so speaking of microtransactions,
just a little bit of money.
Let's move on to, I guess Intel is
$10 billion microtransaction.
I think this was the report, and then I think later on the day we actually had the news article that I think the agreed price was in the $9 billion range, where Intel is selling its NAND flash memory business to Hynix, for some cash. And on the surface, I mean, this article got a good bit of traction on our site. It was fairly, very much a rumor sort of thing. And also when we look at it, most enthusiast gamers are not buying, Intel flash memory at this point, because they've moved on to the Samsungs or the other more budget tiers, whereas you go back 10 years and Intel's kind of like the gold standard in flash memory, so people aren't buying as much, but they're selling it over to Hynix, getting out of that business. And it wasn't very interesting until Dan One brought up a point, and what was that about what Intel is doing here?
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is actually what they're doing, but it does remind me of something that AMD did. For people who may not have known, at one time AMD was not the success that it is today. They wanted to be in the CPU business really bad, but didn't used to make any money at it. And we've joked before about how the company was able to operate at a net loss for like a decade plus, and it was really kind of bizarre. But one of the things that they did in order to generate cash to stay in the CPU business was to sell off its NAND flash business. AMD used to be a very good flash memory maker. They also made traditional memory modules as well, if I'm not mistaken, although that was way back. But they sold that division, which was very profitable. They sold it just so they could have cash to pump into the CPU business and stay alive a bit longer. And Intel, I don't think, is anywhere near the kind of financial trouble that AMD is in, or that AMD was in at the time. But we've certainly seen, declines in their product and everything else. And I don't know, it just reminded me of the fact, Intel selling off a division, of NAND flash memory just so that they can, get some cash infusion. And as a lot of people may or may not be aware, they have a fab in Chandler, Arizona that got retooled for 10 nanometer. And that was like a hugely expensive thing. I mean, Intel, it costs a lot to do that, and people generally are not aware. It takes billions of dollars sometimes to do these fabs. So I don't think Intel is like struggling to the same degree, but I'm thinking they're spending some cash here, and they're looking to kind of trim the less than kind of the businesses that aren't doing super well, the business units trimming the fat back. And we may see a little bit more of this. Again, that's speculative, but they may trim some other things that don't do hugely well. And as you pointed out, they used to actually be big in the SSD market. In fact, when SATA-based SSDs used to be all the rage before we had NVMe, Intels were the ones that we bought, because Intel was like the first company to produce reliable, decent-sized SATA-based SSDs. And, they had continued to do that for quite some time, and they were kind of the performance leader in it too for quite a while. And then, in the last few years, Samsung has just completely pretty much kicked them out of the business.
Right. It's like you can buy a QLC-based, NVMe stick now that doesn't perform as well and costs more than, comparable performing things.
Yeah, I think the last good drive we saw from them was the SSD 750 series, which came in AIC and U.2 formats. And those are fantastic drives. I've still even got a couple of them now. But the Samsungs came out, and they were faster and everything else. And Intel's last effort, to be clear, was kind of lazy, because all they did was they adapted like commercial drives for consumer use. They still performed great at the time they came out. They were the fastest drives on the market, but it was like so short-lived. It was the tiniest window of dominance I think we've ever seen. I mean, Samsung came out, I don't know, a couple months later or something like that, and then boom, they were king, and it's all been kind of Samsung on the high end, and then on the budget end, you got like these inland drives with the Phison controllers, and those are kind of the popular budget choice, as well as some of the like Samsung Evo line. But Samsung just kind of dominates that market right now, for at least in terms of enthusiast machines.
Right. And I think the other thing that was interesting is when I was at CES earlier this year, Hynix had a huge booth that was set up, and one of those things off in the corner was they had some SSDs that they were putting out, and that were brand new, and I've started to see them show up on Amazon as well. So they're starting to get into the business some, even before the Intel purchase, but I think this will just kind of accelerate their preference or presence within the market.
Yeah, Intel, and it's not something that we tend to get into because it's kind of not really, the focus of the site. But, they do have Intel does have some presence in the commercial market on the enterprise sector, and that may be one of the reasons why Hynix purchased them.
Right, absolutely, and they have a lot of other memory products, so they've got the ability to produce, and should be interesting to see what comes with this, and whether they can reclaim some of the magic in the consumer market.
Yeah, their data center SSDs were amazing, at least back 2017. Last time I was using them, I worked in the data center.
They still are.
Okay.
Yeah, and I still see them in the data center. They're not necessarily the best option, but they are actually aggressively priced compared to some other options out there for the data center.
All right. Well, speaking of memory, and I mean, this is, I guess we'll probably pick a bone here, but it sounds like AMD may be endorsing DDR4 4000 memory for the upcoming Ryzen 5000 series processors. Now, I don't think we've seen anything that's been definitive, so this is rumor mill type stuff, but basically saying it's like, hey, you guys need to go upgrade your RAM again in order to extract the most performance out of the Ryzen 5000 series.
Well, this confused me because I thought in the launch video, not launch, that preview, didn't they say it was 3600 megahertz? Like you can expect the same type of experience with RAM? I swear they said that.
No, and really what this comes down to, what people need to understand is, you can use whatever RAM you want with them. What this is it looks like they have adjusted the infinity clock on the Ryzen 5000 series so that without a divider, RAM, you can run DDR4000 memory and get, really good performance. That's the performance sweet spot. With Ryzen 3000 series, it was right around 3733, I think is what they said in their material. But you could take it really as high as 3800, but you'd have to play with your Infinity Fabric clock settings a little bit to do that. You'd have to try and manually set them to 1800, and some chips won't do it. So what this looks like to me is that they're saying that with the changes that they've made to the Ryzen 5000 series, that 4000 will be the new sweet spot. Now, I don't know how they're achieving that, because as I understand it, they're still using X570 motherboards. So I don't know if they support some crazy divider, or they unlock the divider, or how that's going, or if they can simply just handle clocking that divider higher, because the motherboards will let you do it. You can crank them up to 900 or 1900 plus. So it just may be that, these CPUs can handle it. But the funny part they put is like a little good luck at the bottom. And to me, that's because, they know that clocking memory on Ryzen is historically been kind of a pain. And there is some luck of the draw to it. As we tested a lot of X570 boards here since the launch of the 5000, and some of those boards, they can clock memory pretty well, and then some don't. One of the first boards we looked at, the MSI X570 or Meg X570 Godlike, another kind of long name, it is probably the best one we've ever seen for that. The Asus Crosshair, whatever number that is, formula didn't do quite as well on that. And then, we've had boards like the X570 Tough and X570 Pro and all that. They didn't do it quite as well. So it is luck of the draw. It does depend on your memory modules. But what I take this announcement to be is that DDR4000 may be the new sweet spot. And DDR4000 memory, as we've seen, DDR4 prices come down in the last couple of years. It's not going to be a huge cost to go to 4000 if you're shopping for RAM. Like, I don't think they're saying, hey, drop your 3733 that you bought for the last one and then go get 4000, because it's going to just be that much better. It's more like if you're looking to do RAM upgrade anyway, or you're doing a Ryzen build, you might want to look at DDR4000 memory, because it's not that much more than your 3600 or your 3800 megahertz, and the processors, may be able to take advantage of it. On a performance level, it may be kind of the sweet spot for them as well. We'll have to see when the actual review kits and everything come out, like kind of what they actually say. But that's what I'm getting out of this announcement, or rumor, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I read it the same way, kind of, now that you've.
Yeah, so, I mean, doing some recent RAM shopping, and there is a distinct, step up. Like if you're trying to keep the latency at a fairly low level, so if you're looking at, say, CL16 modules, the difference between the 3200 and 3600 memory today can easily be, so if you're buying a 16 gig kit, so two 8 gig sticks, I think you're going to get the 3200 CL16 memory. I have to look up what I just paid. It was probably $60-70. But then if you're going to buy that same latency in 3600, you could spend $50 more than that to hit CL16 3600. The 4000 went even beyond that.
Yeah, well, but I've seen like 4000 megahertz modules on sale for really low price, like a 16 gig kit for a little over $100. I mean, you don't get the RGB and all that stuff, and it's not necessarily the lowest latency stuff, but we have seen 4000 megahertz memory fall quite a bit in price. So, I don't know. You'll probably still pay, a decent chunk for, pretty low latency stuff, but it's not as bad as it was a year ago or 2 years ago.
Right. I mean, I had to look it up. It was $57.99 that I paid, just a week ago for 16 gigs of CL16 3200. And I think my next step up was, probably about $50 more for 3600 CL16.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's like, well, do I buy? So it's the other dilemma is we have some of these games like Flight Simulator. I keep wanting to call it FSX, but it's like new Flight Simulator wants 32 gigs of RAM. So would I rather, buy 32 gigs of PC 3200 and run at the lower latency, or do I want to get 16 gigs of the stupid fast stuff? So I think there'll be some interesting value decisions that need to be made depending on how the performance shakes out of this.
And and I've done some testing on it with at least the 3000 series, and I haven't personally found on the Intels or the AMDs that latency matters. I mean, latency matters, but I haven't seen like huge translations in gaming performance with latency. So for something like Flight Sim, I'd say probably 3200 or 32 gig versus low latency 16 would certainly be the way to go. But I don't know. That's something that we might want to revisit, testing wise, and definitely something that needs to be looked at when the 5000s come along.
Right. Well, that'll be interesting to see. And I think it's November 5th is the on sale date for that. So I'm hoping that reviews will hit the market at about the same time. And we'll find out at that point or a little bit beyond as people have some time to play with the processors to see what they are actually capable of.
Yeah.
And speaking of, kind of wrapping up today, our last article that we have is, of course, the weekly rumor about what the 5600X is going to be able to do to the much more expensive processors on a single thread basis. So I think this article is saying that based on yet another rumor that the 5600X can slap the 10900K and the 3600 XT around with a rainbow trout in single thread performance.
That's just a game changer for that price point. $299 beating a 10900K. That's going to be crazy to see. How many people jump on that bandwagon if that's true? And
they're talking strictly about single thread performance. I don't think that necessarily a 5600 is going to beat like a 10900K, which has a core advantage.
I think for gaming,
take a look at this magical chart right here, though.
Oh, yes.
I mean, that's 10% trout slapping right there.
I think for gaming, you'll see it because 6-core, 12-thread is still, in my personal opinion, the sweet spot. I mean, 8-core, 16-thread is the better buy, in my opinion, now, if you're buying now, but I don't think you need much more than 6-core, 12-thread.
No, you don't. And I've done plenty of testing on that with the 12 and 16-core processors, and no, I would agree with you. Generally, there's a couple of anomalies out there where it's, different. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't doubt it, though. In terms of, like, core for core, single-thread performance, I have no doubt that the Ryzen 5000 series is faster. None at all. AMD has been very straightforward about its processor business. When they said Ryzen was going to come out, they said, hey, it's this much faster than our Bulldozer chips, and it should put it right around here. They said right around Haswell, regular Haswell levels, and it was a little bit better than that. So they've kind of historically with the processors since Ryzen, they've kind of had a behavioral pattern of kind of under promising and over delivering, or at least being pretty spot on with what they promised. And they did say that up to 19% versus the 3000 series single thread IPC. If that's true, and I do have to admit that that's probably a cherry picked case, and they did say up to 19%, so let's not assume it's across the board, but assuming that's kind of correct and that, you even get half that on a regular basis, I don't doubt it, because as it stands now, the 3000 series and a lot of tests we did when those chips came out, they had as good or better IPC than Intel did. Because even these latest chips, I can't remember their stupid code name, the 10th gens, the 10900K, they don't really have an IPC boost over their predecessors. They depend again on clock speed. So, I don't doubt it. I think there's probably a lot of truth in this.
Right. So I'm looking forward to seeing the numbers pop up. But this is going to be some pretty interesting stuff and great for competition and consumers, and hopefully, like the 3000 series, there should be pretty good availability at launch, so that we don't have to really worry about sitting there refreshing like I've been doing for the video cards for the past month. So that should be interesting to see how that one works out. So I think that's kind of all we've got. I guess we're gonna kind of wrap it up with some final points. Look at what's coming up next week and call this one, call it a day here for the Reviewcast number 3. Kind of looking at. I guess we probably should look at next week's schedule and kind of see what's on the docket. I think, but actually, the problem is if I look at next week's schedule and the things that we have planned for that, I don't think I'm allowed to tell you. So what you may have to do is go do some math and think about what hardware is launching over the course of the next week that might have an on-sale date next week. And you can expect to see a launch day review from us on that. We also have you could do the same thing for major AAA games if there are any of those coming out. Take a look and see if there's any of those, and we may have a nice bit up for you for that as well. So that is a good bit of next week. I have to fumble around and kind of see what else we have on the schedule for next week. To keep us entertained here. I think Leroy's Corsair 4000D. We hope to see that next week as well. At least it's on the list.
Yeah, I'm finally getting the Maximus 12 Extreme done. That'll be done tonight for sure. So that's something that we'll be able to put out soon. And then we'll have to decide what board gets the screws put to it next.
Right. Well, there's I think that you have the NZX. Is it NZXT?
Yes, the N7Z 490 from them. And then right. I have the the MSI X570A Pro.
Right, so this will be good to get started. I think Second Dan D has got his. So you've got a Gigabyte B550 on the bench now.
Yep, the Aorus B550.
All right, so that'll be a good one because I'm hoping we're going to be able to chug through a lot of the B550 families that are out there to kind of be able to see. It's like, okay, now we've looked at a dozen of these B550s to be able to see which ones are going to reign supreme across each other. As far as that goes, I think same as last week for me. I've got a Cooler Master 360 millimeter AIO. It's on my docket to get done, and I think Paul's got. This is probably next week material, or not next week material, but that 1650 watt power supply that he was teasing is on the docket to publish in early November as well. So that should be a good one. But a lot of great content. Hopefully with Second Dan D and Eduardo on board, across our usual stuff, you're going to start seeing at least 3 reviews a week out of us going forward as we get the content machine running.
Yeah, and I think we got actually some pretty exciting couple of weeks coming up with reviews and releases.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's going to kind of be like the whole season coming up because, when you think about it, we have. And I was talking to Brent about this. I think it was earlier this week. It's like, okay, we have 3090, 3080, 3070. We probably have a dozen cards from each of those families that need to get reviewed as soon as we can get our hands on them. If a 3060 series launches, that's going to add another couple dozen cards. Then, hey, AMD's launching a whole new family too. So we have. At comparable price points, we're going to have the same series of families to go through. So there'll be no shortage on that end. Lots of boards, as we still haven't caught up on all the X570, the Z490, and the B550 boards that are out there.
There's also some refreshed X570s and possibly B550s coming too with the launch of Ryzen 5000. As we've seen, manufacturers will typically do that even if they don't get a whole new chipset. Like there'll be Asus's, was it Crosshair or whatever, Dark or something? That's an example of that.
Right. So no shortage of good content that's coming up. Even I think I've seated Paul with one of the cheapest things he could find at Micro Center to see if he can blow the power supply up. So we may have a fireworks display before the end of the year.
Be careful with that. That stuff will damage that equipment of his, and it ain't cheap to fix.
Yeah, I know he just got them fixed, so it's like it was his idea, but it's like okay, fine, let's get that, throw it in the backlog, we'll see what happens. As far as fireworks, I'll be mad if it breaks his breaks his stuff. But anyhow, I think that should wrap it up. For the third edition of the FPS Reviewcast. Hope you guys enjoyed participating and watching and all that kind of fun stuff. And we'll do it again next week. And it'll be fun to kind of talk about the stuff I couldn't just talk about.
Yep. And everybody be sure and stay tuned and come back next week.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And I'm just going to cut it right here.